Just what a crazy idea is the wall?
It does depend on who you speak to. So, for example, I cover even rural West Texas, and we actually have a small family farm in Hudspeth County, which is not on the banks of the river, but it's the property behind it that's on the banks of the river. I talk to those folks, and they say, yeah, we could use some fencing here. We really could, because this is a phenomenon, and it changes. The Texas-Mexico border is 1,254 miles. It's very different from El Paso to Brownsville. Congressman Henry Cuellar, a Democrat from Laredo, he was very, very successful under the Obama administrations and even under the Bush administration about not having any barrier built in Webb County, because there the river, it's an actual river. I mean, it's wide and it flows and it's raging. He's like that. We have a natural barrier. In parts of El Paso, it's a makeshift concrete channel where you can skip across it. So in certain areas, it does kind of depend on who you talk to. But I think largely a lot of people are against it. There's been fencing in Texas since the Bush administration. So for example, we did a project called The Taking that talked about eminent domain land seizures down in the Rio Grande Valley. And we concentrated in Cameron County on this 4-mile strip of land called Oklahoma Avenue. And the folks down there, they had their land was seized, and they had a fence running through what used to be their backyard, and it would run for a half mile, and all of a sudden there were these gaps. Not with a fence, just like a gap. And they're like, well, what good is this? I mean, it's like, and yeah, some of them had gates and some of them had codes or whatever. But we have to realize that some of these barriers were actually a half a mile north of the Rio Grande. So which they said renders all the land behind them useless. I mean, I don't know every other state, but in Texas we're pretty proud of our private property and our big ranches and our pickup trucks and whatnot. So this was sort of a blow, especially to see that it didn't really have the effect that it was purported to have. And now in El Paso, you're still seeing people come over. What they started doing in El Paso sector, at least, is they've started improving the existing fence, and they've started putting like a 5-foot steel plate up on top that they say is slip resistant. But we see that it really hasn't slowed the problem. Again, because you cannot build the barrier in the middle of the river. There are treaties, there are agencies that will not let you do that. Mexico would not be on board with that. So it has to be on the north side, it has to be on the US side. And all people that want to seek asylum have to do is cross that international boundary. So you can be south of the fence and north of the Rio Grande, and Border Patrol will come get you. So I mean, it's not an effective solution at all. And again, I think in similar fashion to the president's sort of maybe he wasn't aware about how easy it was going to be to tweak these asylum laws. I think that it was the same thing with these fencings, because there's been lawsuits that have stopped them. And I think most of what he's been able to do has been on federal land, where you don't have to seize any of this private land, and where DHS can apply these waivers to circumvent these environmental regulations. So, I mean, I think if Trump supporters thought, in 2019, where we are, that there would be hundreds and hundreds of more fencing built, I'm sure they're disappointing. So, but the flip side of the coin is that there was a private group that raised $22 million through a GoFundMe account, and part of the leadership was Chris Kobach and certain folks that are very pro-Trump, and they actually built about a half mile of barrier on private land in Sunland Park, New Mexico. So it's just, I mean,
just like 2 or 3 weekends ago, right?
Yeah, it was Memorial Day. I mean, they broke ground on Memorial Day, and they had some of it completed. Now, post that, there was a lot of back and forth on whether they got the necessary permits, and whether the International Boundary and Water Commission was hip to what they were doing, or there was pushback. But that just kind of goes to show sort of the complexity of the issue. This private group through GoFundMe did what the federal government has largely been unable to do. Yeah.